Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to discuss the SiPeed NanoKVM and that secret microphone. You may or may not heard about this in the last 3 or so days via some frankly very polarized reporting. We'll come back to that later on, but around about 3 days or so ago, a website called Telefonec or Telefonsec, I apologise if I butchered the name there, they published a report about the NanoKVM detailing alongside a lot of the day 0 and day 1 software issues that they highlighted back at the start of the year, Q1 2025, to do with the software it rolled out with. We'll come back to that later on. But alongside that, they noticed that the onboard controller inside, the actual main board, I should say, inside the device, featured a small, discrete microphone. And I think a lot of us, when we buy a device that has a small, discrete microphone inside, are right to be thinking, what the hell is going on? But this comes back to that polarization because I didn't hear about this for about 2 days, and it wasn't until larger creators in the space than me actually raised this and I heard about it. And since this has now started rolling, a lot of you have been in touch about it. So I decided to make a video now. I decided to reach out to SiPeed with some very direct questions about this, but I also want to talk about the nature of this and why presentation is as much of an issue here as the fact of the mic being on there and what it means in real terms. But before we go any further, let's drill into that matter of the microphone. A lot of you who have either purchased or are considering purchasing the NanoKVM Pro that we did a review on a few weeks ago, I can tell you right now that this has been running for a further 3 weeks since that review with different testing. Indeed, it's being used right now, apart from me disconnecting it for this, on the MS02 Ultra review that I'm still working on there. And the key point is there is no secret microphone inside now. Now, the reason I point that out is when you go to the specifications pages for this, it does detail that audio transmission is supported, and we will tiptoe back to that later on. But I couldn't see any nefarious microphone inside this device when I opened it up. But returning to the original NanoKVM release, one of the things that I think was pretty universal in some of the early coverage of this device and reviews that went around was that this thing felt rushed out the door. Now, one of the things about the hardware architecture of the NanoKVM is that the board inside was actually from another device. That was the Lichee KVM, now the Lichee RV Nano. Now, the Lichee RV Nano is detailed on SiPeed's own web pages, and if you go on that page right now, it does detail that it has a microphone on board. I'm slightly concerned that this is something they've just quickly, hastily updated, but it turns out that is by no means the case. You go back on WayBackMachine, you can go back all the way to February 2024, almost 2 years ago at this point, and it does detail the individual microphone components on there. There was no secrecy about it, and arguably the software was probably even more immature at that point, and a lot of users would have gone straight open source and used other alternatives, something that is still possible on these devices. Now, returning to the NanoKVM, so not the Pro series device, the NanoKVM, the problem we have here is how they present the information, because if you go to the NanoKVM page right now, it details that this device is using that Lichee RV controller board inside, and it details the microphones there. But once you go on WayBackMachine, if you go back to the start of this year, I was looking at February 2025, you notice on there that it doesn't mention the mic. It mentions the Lichee RV board being used, but doesn't mention the mic. And that's going to be problematic, I think, for some users that would have wanted to know that the hardware of the device they are getting had that mic inside. Now, fast forward to May 2025, and they updated that page to detail not only that it's using the Lichee RV controller board, but also that it is utilizing, that it has those mics on board. So clearly there was enough either feedback or criticism that they received to go ahead and update that page in May of this year to actually detail the mic hardware on board there. However, once you get onto the pages of the NanoKVM Pro, it's worth highlighting that on those product pages, and again, you can go back to the WayBackMachine, but it doesn't make too much of a difference in this case, they detail on there, notwithstanding that this is using its own unique board design inside, but they make comparisons there between the original NanoKVM and GLI Net Comet and the Jet KVM. And on those pages, there's mention of audio transmission. I told you we'd come back to it, but that was really to just carry over the noise back and forth. But it should have detailed in the specs there, at least on that page, if you're going to go to the trouble of updating other pages about it utilising the Lichee RV controller board, then you should have mentioned that microphone being on there. Circling back to that polarised reporting I mentioned earlier on, it's worth highlighting that although the original article I referenced at the beginning was actually pretty bloody fair, the reporting on this afterwards has been all over the shop. What case in point, in the original article there, and again, Apple Adventure, check out that video as well, they detailed all of the issues that day one security had. Great ones, such as plain text passwords, default SSH, background passwords that if you didn't actively change them and it didn't recommend you change them out the gate, it meant hard-coded credentials effectively to root control every single device. Utilising network analysis tools internally, tools pre-installed like TCP dump and more. These are not great things. And again, hard-coded encryption keys as well. All of these, many of them I should say, have been rectified in updates, not all crucially. But that microphone to be used by malicious intent externally would require a security pathway or an insecure pathway to that mic. It's still usable, and they do a great demonstration, by the way, on that original article, showing you just how you could actually use it if you wanted to, which I thought was kind of funny actually. But because of the detailing of the security vulnerabilities of the day zero, some of which have been patched and removed or rectified, as well as not really covering the element in some articles that you can use other open source software on board instead of theirs, it has led to a very divisive opinion around this. For me, the big issue is the fact that they weren't clear about the mic, saying we are using this other device and not on day one detailing on there that yes, we're using the board from the Lichee RV and it has an onboard mic. That to me is the problem. They needed to articulate that, because we are still talking about a KVM here, and I think a lot of us have slightly lost sight of the fact, and we'll get to the Q&A in a bit, that if you connected, say this was the original NanoKVM and you connected it to your device, having the mic isn't as bad as all of the security issues that would be required and to be not rectified to allow that mic to be exploited. And once that level of issue and that level of vulnerability has been exploited, accessing the mic is nothing compared to controlling the device it's connected to. I have not found a single review of the NanoKVM or the NanoKVM Pro where those reviews have not detailed, make sure you've got your security in place. This is a budget device coming out of the East. Rack up your device, rack up your VPNs, use Tailscale, which you can use on there, consider open source. All of them have recommended that at this price point, these devices are fantastic, but they have also all highlighted to be securely vigilant. I say this on NAS devices, I'll say it about routers from third-party brands. Hell, the day before making this video, this thing arrived at my office. This is a Wi-Fi 7 router. It's got 10 GBs, some absurd specifications. We're going to be reviewing it in the next few weeks. But the point I'm making is there's absolutely no way in that review that I'm not going to caveat the absolute hell out of this to say this is an unknown brand to me. I'm going to check the DNSs it's accessing. I'm going to check all of what it is actually exchanging in the background via my ISP. I'm going to mention that. And I don't know how that's going to be priced, but these NanoKVMs, they're very, very cheap. And I don't think anyone has detailed reviews or shared their experiences with them without heavily highlighting that you need to stay vigilant anyway. For me, the big issue here is how poorly they have presented this information early doors. A great example of poor presentation, by the way, we could circle back. I mentioned it earlier on, WD Red. WD Red drives rolled out with shingle magnetic recording instead of traditional CMR, PMR, conventional magnetic recording, or perpendicular magnetic recording on the drives inside there. Now, they actually got fined stupid amounts of money with people getting almost sod all money, and that was a much bigger deal. because those were not, those drives, which are still available for sale, by the way, were using a recording technique where when data was being written to them consistently and they were getting very, very full, in the event of a RAID failure and a drive rebuild, it actually left your array in quite an unstable state in terms of rebuilding, depending on the scale of your RAID array there. That, to me, is an enormously bad issue. This is still not a great issue, frankly, when it's got the mic on board there, but it was presented by everyone, probably less so by the brand themselves, as a way of set it up but know what you are getting in terms of security and in terms of your responsibility and indeed their responsibility as well. And my big issue, as mentioned, is the lack of presentation that mic was there and how it has been relayed. Not that it's there, but how badly they relayed that information. The irony is that if SiPeed or GLI Net or anyone rolled out a KVM device next year that had a microphone on the outside and a speaker, I think there would be users that would actually quite like the idea. The idea is that they could get their device there, they'd want to be able to control it and disable it, crucial, but the idea is that they could have support somewhere, have this set up and actually talk to someone back and forth about what they're doing. That would actually be called a feature. Having a mic on board, but the way they have done it, the way it has been presented, a secret microphone inside, in conjunction with terrible security practices, is the issue here. But that's enough of me pseudo speaking on behalf of this brand. Let's hear their own words, their own points and justifications. So I put 6 questions forward to this brand that I thought were the 6 most salient points about this from either affected or potentially affected users who could have bought this device. It is worth highlighting it's the same chap that we spoke to at the tail end of the NanoKVM review, Pro series review, when I put forward a lot of the security questions about how many of the security holes that were found in Q1 had been addressed. I'm going to read my questions. I'll probably get an AI or something to read their responses just so it breaks it up and you don't have to keep hearing my sodding voice. So question 1, why was there a microphone on the device and how/why was its absence on documentation?
This premise contains a serious factual error made by the original article. The presence and rationale for the microphone are not undocumented. They are explicitly mentioned on the product's main wiki page.
Won't lie, I'm not hugely happy with this response as detailed earlier in this video. I think saying it was using a board from another device and then updating it in May to reflect that the mic was on there, not a big fan of that. It should have been all of that information or not. So I don't think they were as explicit as this comment suggests. I do think they have updated and detailed stuff in there, and certainly way in advance of the article from a few days ago, but I wouldn't agree completely that they have explicitly mentioned it. Which version, batch or revisions of NanoKVM feature this microphone?
The microphone is featured on the NanoKVM Lite and NanoKVM Cube versions. These are derivative products based on the Lichee RV Nano, and consequently inherited its single-board computer peripherals, including the microphone, speaker, and MIPI touchscreen support.
So that's kind of in line with everything that we'd learned so far about this, and I'm not hugely surprised. It's just reassuring. They've provided product images, by the way, that I'll put in an article below of the inside of a number of these devices. But again, it does look like it is just those devices that were taking advantage of the Lichee RV. Is this present on other versions of NanoKVM, PCIe, Pro, USB, etc.?
No. Other products use custom-designed boards dedicated solely to the KVM scenario. They do not reuse the SBC module and therefore do not include non-KVM essential components.
I know it seems like I've just asked the same question twice, but I think it's important to differentiate revisions of the original NanoKVM against that of these new follow-up refreshes and splinters. Ultimately, it seems that they're saying it's only that older box that was utilising the previous controller board. Why was this microphone not eliminated at the point of production?
The core part of NanoKVM Cube/Lite is Lichee RV Nano. We reuse Lichee RV Nano as a standard SOM in many different products, like AI Camera MaxCam, and our TOB customer also use it as a standard Linux core board, just like RPI CM4, CM5. They are very satisfied with the onboard microphone, speaker, and touchscreen. As stated in my previous message, we maintain that logically, the retention of the microphone on the board does not introduce any negative impact on security. While the onboard components, microphone, speaker power amplifier, and touchscreen connector, introduce a slight increase in bill of materials cost, this decision significantly simplifies inventory management. In fact, the base Lichee RV Nano product already comes in 4 configuration variants: Basic, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, and Ethernet plus Wi-Fi. If we were to further segment the inventory by adding options for the presence or absence of the microphone and touchscreen connector, the total number of SKU would increase exponentially. The number of SKU multiplies by 2 for every added configuration options. Therefore, based on a comprehensive consideration of security, cost efficiency, and inventory management complexity, we maintain the microphone, speaker PA, and touchscreen connector as the default base configuration.
What steps are being taken to ensure that this does not pose a security or privacy threat to users who have the NanoKVM in active deployment?
Users must understand the threat model. An attacker can only listen via the onboard mic if the NanoKVM itself has already been fully compromised. The paradox is that once compromised, the attacker already has sufficient privileges to perform high-level operations, include record audio via PC's own microphone. Therefore, the presence of the onboard mic does not increase the inherent security risk of the device. We emphasize that proper network risk awareness and isolation configuration by the user are essential, regardless of whether the device is a NanoKVM, Jet KVM, GL.INET KVM, or Pi KVM.
I can't really say they're wrong. Again, we've already detailed this, and this was kind of the thought process already long before I even started recording this video and getting this reply. But again, it still does come down for me to users that have got devices like this and knowing the hardware they got. Imagine here on the channel when I talk about network attached storage all the time, imagine one day you found out that one brand, let's not get libelous, let's say any of the NAS brands that I talk about, had a microphone inside, and you'd had the device in your home or office for days, weeks, months, or years. You might have been given this device remote access. You may even have been using the brand's own relay services in order to remote access the device with small packets, even if it was just exchanging. Now, in that world, if I found out that I'd had a mic, a hot mic, or a potential hot mic for that matter, on my system that could have been compromised by any Linux, any basic app, cat mouse, vulnerability fix update, I'd be pissed. For me, it's about not knowing that there is a mic inside my device. And again, the presentation of this is what has been my problem. What further steps have been made or planned at production to avoid this occurring again in future hardware releases?
We plan to remove the microphone in the next batch of the Lite/Cube models, purely for psychological comfort and ease of mind for our users. We acknowledge this step will inevitably increase our inventory management complexity due to the need for separate SKU and production processes. We are also implementing more rigorous hardware audits to ensure compliance with the principle of least privilege in future designs.
I'm not sure I'm a big fan of the phrase psychological comfort. I don't know if this is a language difference or perhaps just a culture difference. I know what they're saying and I completely understand, but I can definitely understand how that phrase might rub people up the wrong way when, again, with that polarized reporting. But if the mic is removed, we're still left with a KVM box here that I think a lot of you would still have to make sure you've got your security layers in place. They themselves, in their response detail, very much are the same effect. Now, if you can probably open up the device yourself and with some tricky desoldering or maybe even just a fancy bit of screwdriver work, you can probably just kill the mic if you wanted to. No one really wants to do that. But let's be realistic, a lot of users find it weirdly irresistible to fall down the trap of China bad on a lot of these products when realistically, again, a lot of the hardware we use and maybe even the device you're watching this on right now, not only has it got a microphone and a speaker attached, but a lot of the components are made in China. It isn't that black and white. If you go over to Level 2 Jeff, I think his video came out on Tuesday of this week, he goes into a lot better detail about this and sort of talking about, you know, who do you trust with these devices? And arguably that, again, that fine line between your responsibility and the brand's responsibility, I would argue. Again, detailed on that very same article that we've highlighted several times here, that a lot of these concerned about the mic have arisen from. We could talk about Apple and Siri and that large, was it just shy of 100 million fine. Talk about Google still currently going through legal right now to do with, hey, Google, it's doing its recording when it shouldn't have. And I'm pretty sure my phone probably woke up when I said that. We could go through a myriad of smart home appliances that have been passively aggregating data with or without the user's consent there. Bringing regional, doubt into this, I'm not going to say it's unfair, but I am going to say might not be salient for every case. Do I deploy this KVM or two others with free, unfettered, wickety wild west internet access? Sod no. I've got firewalls in place around it. I've got it on its own VLAN. I've got VPN tunnels in place there. There is no way I will allow this to just freely access the internet as it pleases there because I'm connecting it to my devices. Sometimes it can be a bugger to remote access because of the layers I put in there, but that's the choice we make. I do the same thing with my NAS devices, be it wherever in the world they are from, China, Taiwan and more. I do it with my Unify switch, which although is an American company, has hardware, I believe some of it coming out of Singapore and Thailand and more. I could look at my Axis camera, not 4.5 meters away from where I'm recording. There's no way I would give that unfettered access there. And users that are going to deploy a device like this in mission critical or highly secure confidential client devices without those layers of security in place, I don't think claiming ignorance in its entirety is cool. I do think this brand needed to be a lot more transparent about that mic than they were. I do think their security at day 0 and indeed day 1 was Swiss cheese, and they need to do more to fill those gaps, but at the same time they are facilitating open source. But we as end users also at least have to acknowledge that we do have some of the responsibility about how these are deployed, and we have a responsibility to understand software development and the cat and mouse game of updates that 2025 and onwards is. All of these devices with internet access, people are going to try to find vulnerabilities, and when they find them in Linux, when they find them in all of these building block platforms, they get patched and they try again. Cat and mouse, and we can't connect a device to the internet and then be annoyed when we don't install software updates. But that's a discussion for another day. When it comes to the microphone on the NanoKVM, I am pissed. But I am pissed that they weren't louder and prouder and clearer about it, especially with so many holes in that software on day 1. I'm not pissed about it being there. I'm pissed about the way it's been presented. But what about you guys? What do you guys think? There should be an article detail below going into more detail. And again, we will be looking into a little bit more on the NanoKVM Pro soon because we've got some other comparisons coming up, and we should maybe look into just how and when you should and shouldn't deploy these. But thank you so much for watching. Let's have a discussion / probably an argument in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.